Hey, deserving listeners, it's time for me to respond to your comments from my videos from last week. Let's get to it. Well, first off, shout out to my favorite guitar YouTuber who repairs guitars. They're very soothing to me. I don't repair guitars myself, never will, but I like the videos. I like his channel, very soothing, interesting. Answering upper tier emails number 2. I have dog hair on my face. So I was experimenting with making an audio podcast and actual video. I've been trying to do that a little bit more lately, and I did that here. AE Creative says, just a heads up, I've been a subscriber of yours ever since you came on YouTube, and today YouTube says I'm not a subscriber. You may want to be sure you're not losing any subscribers due to a glitch. Yeah, I looked into this, and I don't know, but I think what's happening is YouTube occasionally will delete subscribers because they're bots or they're unused accounts or something. So that happens sometimes, I guess. But if you're not a bot and you're not someone who doesn't watch my channel every once in a while, then you shouldn't be unsubscribed. So if you're watching this and you were a subscriber, you might want to make sure that you're still a subscriber. Although I think the algorithm doesn't necessarily care if you're a subscriber. You know, there are channels that I don't subscribe to that I will be fed their stuff because they think I might want to watch it. So I don't know if it matters all the time if you're a subscriber. Anyway, Elizabeth Swift says, number 1, so I was asking about like Hawaiian pizza and that kind of thing in the last in that video. Number 1, we have had Hawaiian pizza in Alabama on the menu all my life. Pineapple on pizza is not my favorite, but I will eat it if that is all that is available. Yeah, well, that's what I figured. I figured Hawaiian pizza was on the menu ever since it was on our menus, which I think started in the 70s or 80s. So, but after hearing everyone talk about how they didn't want pineapple on pizza, and people were adamant about it, I just thought like, and I'd never heard that before until 5 years ago. And so I thought, well, did no one else? Anyway, so number 2, Elizabeth, you say, clowns are scary, and I have felt this way all my life. Okay. And number 3, you say, there's nothing wrong with the word moist. These are my opinions. Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm sure you'll get lots of different opinions about that. But regarding clowns, it's all about association, you know, and there were a few comments, people saying that, look, I grew up in the 80s and I was terrified of clowns. I think you might have to go back farther. You know, I was born 1970, and clowns were a totally different phenomenon back then. And now, could you be born in the 70s or 60s and still consider clowns to be scary? Yeah, but the point is that it's all about association, and this is important. And it's important when it comes to ketchup on hot dogs or pineapple on pizza or the word moist. It's all about culture and association and social construction and cultural relativism and the cultural pocket you live in and your experiences. And when you understand that, then you state it as such. Like for me, I don't say clowns are inherently not scary, but people will say clowns are inherently scary, and they don't understand how anyone could possibly think that clowns were not scary. And they will judge people for thinking that clowns aren't scary, that kind of thing. But it's all about culture. It's all about association. So for me, growing up in the 70s, me and my 3 siblings, clowns were associated with everything good. They were associated with kid-friendly events, McDonald's. Like, people think that Ronald McDonald is creepy, and I can kind of see that. But growing up, Ronald McDonald was this wonderful thing. I mean, McDonald's was one of the only kid-friendly restaurants that was in the 70s, and they were very geared towards that. And kids in the 70s, that's all we wanted to do was go to McDonald's. And you know, they had like birthday parties, and you know, like in Issaquah where I grew up, there wasn't anything else. Well, there was like pizza parlor places, but it wasn't like geared towards kids. Anyway, point is that we also had JP Patches, which is a clown on TV locally in Seattle on Channel 5, King 5, which is NBC. And we actually have a statue of him and his partner, his fellow clown, Gertrude, in Fremont. If you've ever been to Fremont in Seattle, there's a really great statue there. People dress up the statues. But for us growing up, JP Patches was the most important TV show for us kids growing up. And he was just a classic clown, you know, one of those sad clowns kind of thing. Clowns are associated with parades and circuses and parties, and And it was just a wonderful experience. Whenever we saw clowns in the 70s, for me and my siblings, it meant good times for kids. It meant that we could enjoy ourselves and that there might be candy and ice cream and fun and singing and dancing. It was a wonderful experience. Now, if you grew up with a negative experience with clowns, particularly when you were very young, say you're 4 years old and a clown scares you, for example, and you never had subsequent positive associations with clowns, or every time you saw a clown, because of the trauma of having seen the clown that scared you and no one was there to kind of help you, then it just compounded, right? And so by the time you're older, clowns are inherently scary to you. That's the important thing, is there are some things in our universe that are culturally relative. Being stabbed in the leg is not culturally relative. Being stabbed in the leg hurts. I'm guessing you could find one or two people that might consider that to be pleasurable, but barring that, it's not a cultural thing to consider stabbing in the leg to be painful. We don't invent that idea and then propagate that through culture. Clowns are, if aliens came from outer space and looked at us and saw clowns and saw other kinds of humans, they probably wouldn't differentiate. They'd be like, so the clowns are the ones with this kind of makeup, but other people have makeup on. So how do you differentiate between clowns? So it's a cultural thing that we create. In fact, there are probably other cultures around the world that look at the United States or Europe or something and look at clowns and are just like, I don't understand what's going on here, because we grew up with it, right? So the reason why I want to hammer on this is not to somehow shame anyone, but I think that when it comes to certain ideas in our society, we have to be humble. We have to recognize that our preferences, even if a lot of people around us share those preferences are not reality. Your point of view is not reality. Your cultural pocket is not reality. And being humble about that and recognizing that and being tentative about things really helps to see things more accurately, but also to live harmoniously within a society. If we're going to get along and we're going to understand each other, we're not going to judge each other, and we're going to help each other out, then we have to recognize that we come from a particular cultural pocket. And when you live in the dominant cultural pocket, the tendency is to colonize other people. And, I don't want to say that anti-clown people are colonizing us old people, but, it's analogous to that. And so we'll use that, silly manifestation as a learning point. So pineapple on pizza. If you hate pineapple on pizza, if you hate ketchup on a hot dog, that is your preference and you're 100% entitled to that. You could be adamant about that preference. You could see, ketchup on your hot dog. You're served a hot dog with ketchup. You could send that back to the chef and say, how dare you? Or, well, I don't want that. Don't say how dare you. Would say, that's not my preference. I hate that. And we all hate that here. That's okay. You can say you hate something, but you can't say it's inherently wrong. Wearing white after Labor Day is not inherently wrong. Having the fork on the left or where the hell it's supposed to go is not the right way. It's just a way. It's your preference. You can have that preference, and that's okay. So, and in psychology and social psychology, we study this a lot. We study social constructionism. And when people don't understand that, when they don't have a critical mind, when they're looking at their own preferences, really horrible things can happen. I'll give an extreme example. There were, European white settlers that came to the Americas, to North America, and considered it the New World. It's not the New World. It was there before they came. It's just a different continent that they just hadn't been to yet. But anyway, so they come to the Americas, and over time, they start to dehumanize the native populations, the people that were already here. And thus, they don't deserve the same rights. Think about black people around the time of the Constitution being authored 250 years ago in the United States, that black people, black slaves, were 2/5 of a human or something. So that's all based on cultural relativism and people imposing their preference or the way that they see things in a way that empowers them. And they state it as fact. God has said that black people are 2/5 human beings. God has said that the natives in this land are savages and not worthy of this land because they're not They're not cultivating it the way God intended. Okay, that we all understand that, right? So if we're going to stop those atrocities, or Russia invading Ukraine and just making up a story of, this is the way that it is, and we're going to kill people because our preference is reality. So if we don't apply that cultural relativism lens on how we see things, then this kind of thinking can run out of control in some very harmful ways. And obviously there are other kinds of consequences that aren't as severe as that, but still quite severe. People walking around who don't look a certain way and think of themselves as ugly or not worthy because society has a preference that becomes the dominant point of view, and it just becomes fact that unless you look like this, you are not beautiful, you are not worthy, you are not a good person. And then everyone just believes that, but that's a preference, and you don't have to look very afar culturally, even in our own culture back 100 years, to know that our preferences regarding beauty changes over time drastically. So we need to have that critical eye, and we need to be talking about it all the time. And so that's one of the reasons why because I'm so oriented that way, I'm so trained that way, that when I see things, I'm like, what's going on here? And I will call it out, like the pineapple on pizza thing. It's just an example of that, because the way that people will say is that pineapple is inherently stupid. It's absurd to have it on pizza. It's wrong to have it on pizza. And I'm guessing a lot of people are just exaggerating for effect, and it's fun for them. But anyway, so that's me turning a fun conversation into a lecture. Karina says, I live in Ontario, Canada. Oh, that's where he's from. Ontario, Canada. Hamilton, Ontario. I live in Ontario, Canada, and Hawaiian pizza has always been a thing here for at least 40 years, so it's not just a West Coast U.S. thing. My favorite argument against pineapple on pizza is that fruit doesn't belong on pizza. It makes me laugh because tomatoes are fruit. Legs Fall Off Girl says, I'd always heard the issue with clowns was related to the exaggerated makeup, making the features on the face difficult to discern. This is another point I want to bring up, is that when people's preference become reality, like clowns are inherently scary, and people just say, that's our reality, and anyone who disagrees with that is wrong or something, they will start to gather pseudoscientific evidence to bolster their claim. Like, well, black people are 2/5 human because look at how they live. I mean, scientifically, just they don't know how to read. They don't know how to write. They're immoral. Look at their behavior, okay? That's their scientific way of evaluating that. When phrenology started to come out 150 years ago, when they would use bumps on the head to evaluate people's personalities, and it was really considered cutting-edge science at the time. This is before we had data and a lot of funding for this kind of research, but there were people, white people who were educated, who were using phrenology to state and scientifically conclude that black people and brown people were inherently criminal and stupid because of the bumps on their head. So this is along those lines, is the issue with clowns was related to exaggerated makeup, making the features on the face difficult to discern. Well, the fact that you have some people like myself that consider clowns to be enjoyable and not scary, in fact, it's the opposite of scary, they're inviting, okay? And some people who consider clowns to be scary, which is fine, that's your experience or your preference or whatever you want to say. But to say that, okay, well, we have data, scientific data as to why clowns are scary. No, the reason why clowns are scary, I'm guessing, is that people's experience with clowns were negative, or they didn't have any positive experiences. That could be another thing. It's like, if you're not primed when you're 3, when I was 2 years old, there's actually a picture of me and my siblings and my parents at a parade in downtown Issaquah, Washington, just outside Seattle, and there are clowns, and we're actually dressed up as clowns. That's how much we loved clowns, is we would dress up as clowns with makeup and stuff. And my mom, I think, out of material and I don't know what you call it, but you would trace it out on the fabric, and she would sew these costumes. Anyway, I'm guessing when I was 2, 3 years old and we saw the clowns come up, I might have been a little startled, but I looked to my siblings and I looked to my parents, and they were like, "Yay, clowns!" And I was like, "Oh, okay, these are fun people." So that's my association. And what we call in science, we call these just so stories. These are stories that we tell ourselves to justify a particular point of view, and we might even make up scientific claims as a way of bolstering our point of view. But we call them just so stories because you're just grabbing data and maybe scientific evidence. For example, it wouldn't be hard to design a study in which you have people in a lab, and often these are college students. So these are college students of today or 10 years ago. And you say, what things are scary to you? And you have like celebrity pictures and clown pictures. And they rate the clown pictures as being more scary. And then you manipulate the makeup to try to figure out what is it about the makeup that makes the clown scary. And then you take all those data and you derive a conclusion that, well, when we change the makeup to look less exaggerated as a clown, the clowns became less scary. Thus, the reason why clowns are scary is because of exaggerated makeup. That is what we call a just so story, because it's based on a premise that clowns are inherently scary. They could be scary to those people because of those reasons, but not to everyone is the thing. And so often these studies are geared around college students in the North. We actually call this the weird part of research, the problem with research, and that the typical participant in psychological studies are a convenience sample in that they happen to be students in your program. So while I'm on this topic, I don't think I've talked about this in a while. When you are a psychologist and you're trying to get published because you need to publish frequently in order to have tenure and to hold on to your position at a university, then you don't have much money to actually fund research. You have limited funds and limited time in your own schedule because you're also teaching and all this stuff. Then you will tend to look for studies that are easily completed, right? And one of the easiest ways you can complete a study is if you study participants who are in your class or in your school of psychology. And one of the ways you can incentivize that is you take the students in the university and you say you can get extra credit if you participate in the psychological studies that this university is actually conducting. I actually did this when I was in my undergrad at University of Washington. We did things involving alcohol and other things. They would feed me alcohol, and I would have to take all these tests on this computer. I think it was, and then they would shock me. Literally, they would shock me. I think the computer test was designed to actually just distract me, to give me something to do. But because the test on the screen, I just remember thinking, this is so hard, even sober. But they would give me screwdrivers. I remember they'd give me vodka with orange juice. And it was this procedure, right? So it's like, okay, now drink your drink. And so, it's like noon and I'm just drinking this vodka orange juice concoction. And I had this electrode hooked up to my arm. And then every once in a while, this noise would start to build up. And it was, I don't know, a minute or two of escalating noise. And then I would get a shock. And so you knew when it was coming. You're just like, oh crap, here. And I think the shocks got more intense or something. And what I think they were trying to do is gauge my physiological response to the shock. I don't think they were actually trying to gauge my reaction to the test. I don't think the alcohol, because I think they were saying, you need to do well in the test. And I thought, oh, so the alcohol, this is a test to see if alcohol affects the test. But I remember sober thinking the test was like almost indecipherable. I just remember there was these images. Anyway, so we call them a weird sample because, so if I can remember the acronym here, or what do you call it? Anyway, W meaning white, E, so weird, W meaning white, E meaning educated, I meaning industrialized, coming from industrialized country, R meaning rich, and D meaning democratic, I think. I'm not quite sure. I can't remember. But anyway, something like 99% of psychological studies are on those kinds of people, typically from the Northeast, because there's a lot of people living in the Northeast of the United States, but there's also a lot of well-funded psychological programs. So just think about that 99% of claims in psychology come from that very micro group of people. So my point is that when we make claims about those kinds of things, like, oh, clowns are inherently scary because of the makeup thing, often what we're talking about is that weird sample in the Northeast and of young people who are taking classes, they get extra credit to do this psychological study. And then we say, therefore, universally to all humans, clowns are thus, which is dubious and also colonizing and racist in a lot of ways, or at least culturalist. And so that's another point I want to point out. Now, I'm not an expert on clown research and psychology. Might there be a lot of nuances there that I don't know about? I'm guessing there is. But we all just have to have a critical mind set when we are looking at preferences. Like I said, stabbing in the leg, not a preference. Being abused by your partner, it's nothing culturally relative about that. There might be cultural relative elements about IPV, but not about the inherent harm that happens from IPV. But when it comes to pineapple or clowns or the word moist, these are culturally relative. And that's one thing, and I think I might have said this before, that as I age, I am starting to see shifts in language. It's one of the cultural pockets that morphs over time. The word moist, for example. And it's another thing, just more broadly, is how we're all kind of in the gutter these days. And I think I go along with that for the most part. But there are some parts where I'm just like, really, people? Like, I grew up in the 70s when we had a American football player named Dick Buttkiss. His name was Dick Buttkiss. Dick Buttkiss. I might get banned from YouTube just for saying his name. No one made fun of his name. He was a linebacker and maybe a coach eventually. Chicago Bears, I believe. And no one made fun of him. They said his name all the time. He was one of the most famous football players in the 70s or 60s. Anyway, don't remember exactly when. But now, if you had a dude named Dick Buttkiss, in fact, you can't even... So we have a hamburger place in Seattle called Dick's. And if you live in Seattle, it's like our In-N-Out burger, which is another funny phrase. And what is it with names? Anyway, so in Seattle, if you go, oh, can't wait to get some dicks. But to me, that doesn't say, it's just, burgers and fries and shakes and soda. That's what that means. And usually it's late at night, like at 3 a.m. And so it's cultural relativism, it's cultural pockets. So, but the point is that over time, I feel like we've become so much more silly about language, like the word moist. When I was growing up, moist meant moist. But now I think everyone thinks of bodily fluids, and you're just like, why? Like, I can have a can of soda that builds up condensation on the outside, it gets moist, but somehow like people can't get their head out of the gutter, which I have gone along with, which is fine. But anyway, my point is, and that's fine, language changes. Every word that I was introduced to in the 70s was morphed from some word 50 years prior, whenever you look at etymology of words. Anyway, let's move on. Moon Woman says, how much dissociation is normal? Does derealization and depersonalization happen to everyone sober? Does one have to be on meds forever to keep from doing it? Okay, well, first off, Moon Woman, I would listen to my deep dives on dissociation because I don't have time, because I've wasted so much time thus far yammering and lecturing to people about how they're wrong about everything. But is dissociation normal? Well, it depends on what you mean by dissociation. If you're talking about the DSM version, no, it's not typical, but it's certainly normal and common enough because of trauma. So something on the order of, 3 to 5% of people will suffer from some dissociative disorder at some point in their life. Don't quote me on that percentage, just a rough guess. You ask, does derealization and depersonalization happen to everyone? No. Derealization, depersonalization, if we're talking about the DSM definition, is a horrific dissociative disorder that is horrible. And when people go through that, their lives are ruined often. So does it happen to everyone? No. Now, if we're talking about general derealization, general depersonalization, general dissociation, if we stretch it's sort of like some people can have an anxiety disorder, but everyone has experienced anxiety, right? So if we think about just common experiences that are dissociative, like, yeah, probably everyone has experienced some point in their life something kind of derealization, like you're in a kind of boredom state and you're sitting there in class and you're listening to me lecture right now, or you're watching YouTube and you just kind of check out. Well, you could kind of say that's dissociative, like, but it's not dissociative. It's not a dissociative disorder. It's not even close to it. Then you ask, does one have to be on meds forever to keep from doing it? There is no med for dissociation, unfortunately. It's something that you can mitigate a little bit with meds to take the edge off that will reduce the likelihood of triggers. You can also take meds that can help with the mood effects from dissociation, but there's no med to stop dissociation, unfortunately. Kay Ann says, is your wife Enneagram 4? I'm just asking because I have like a 99% success rate at guessing other people's Enneagrams. I guess you are a 1, Dr. Honda. Okay, well, let's go into Enneagram here, because I get asked this a fair amount. And me and Berto did a whole deep dive. You can listen to that audio episode. I think it's a couple hours, and we go into depth on all the science and everything and what it is. But what I'll say is my wife 4? Well, I texted her, and she says she's a 9. But so 9 is the agreeable peacemaker. So that's what that person is. And I think she might have also been some other one. I can't remember. I'm looking at the list here. I can't remember. But anyway, she says she tested as a 9. Am I a 1? Well, I actually took several tests when I was doing the deep dive and also looked at all the categories. And here's what I'll say is I am 7 out of 9 of the categories, which I'll get into later in terms of the critique of this model. Enneagram's fine if you like it. There's nothing wrong with liking it, but it's not very useful as a psychological tool. So my top types, which is not really possible within an Enneagram model, you're supposed to have like one that's definitely you, and then you might have 2 others that are secondary to that, complementary to that one. But I have 7. So I am 3, 5, 7, 8, but I'm also a 1, 2, and 4. So I'm definitely a 3, 5, 7, and 8, but I have a lot of 1, 2, and 4. So you got that right. But 1 out of 7 chance. Anyway, I'm mostly not a 9. I'm a little bit of a 9, but I'm mostly not a 9. So I'm probably like 20% a 9. My wife is probably a lot 9. I point over here because that's where she's texting. I'm definitely not a 6. So to go over what those are is 3, 5, and 7, and 8 are my top, which is 3 is achiever, but also maybe narcissistic. 5 is cerebral, but might be detached and arrogant. Number 7 is adventurer and optimistic, but might be impatient and insensitive at times. And number 8 is courageous leader, but might be bossy. 1, so that's those are like, yeah, I'm all those. I'm an achiever. I'm a narcissistic achiever. I'm a detached cerebral person. I'm a optimistic adventurer who is definitely impatient, and I'm a courageous leader, but I'm also prone to being bossy at times. I've worked on that over, so it's the shadow side to all these are what I'm mentioning as well. 1, 2, and 4. 1 is a perfectionist person. I'm definitely that, you've heard me talk about that a lot. 2 is generous, but also potentially people-pleasing. Number 4 is creative, sensitive, but you might also have what I interpret to be kind of like borderline traits. Number 9, again, is agreeable peacemaker. I'm mostly not this, but I have a little bit of it. And 9s can also be kind of checked out. I'm definitely not a 6, which is an anxious, watchful person who is very trustworthy or overly trustworthy, that kind of. And there are different authors that will characterize these differently, but it's in the ballpark. So Kay, your 99% might have just been dropped down to 98 since you got both me and my wife wrong, or you got me, I guess, kind of right, but you didn't get one of my top 4. Now, let me talk about Enneagram and why we don't use it as psychologists. Most people, for one, can predict their type before taking the test. So you give people the 9 categories and you say, which one do you think you will test as? And something like 90% of people, according to research, will be able to, oh, that's me. That's probably what I'll test as. And then you give the people the test, and then it does show that indeed that is what the test will show. So what does it say? Now, for the pro Enneagram people will say, well, the Enneagrams are very useful. Well, yeah, but you don't need the test. If you can just show people the 9 categories and say, which one are you, then why do you have a test? You're just asking people to choose 9 different descriptions, and they're able to do that. So another way of looking at it is that the test is literally just summarizing your responses, which is kind of true about the Myers-Briggs as well. That the test and the Enneagram, and there's various different, it will say something like let's just take the achiever. So there might be a question on there of just like, I, throughout the day, am thinking about accomplishing things and achieving things is a big part of my drive. Okay. So, how true is that statement for you? And I would say, oh, it's very true. And then as a part, later as a result of the test, they would say, you are an achiever. All day long, you think about achieving things and accomplishing things. And if I wouldn't know better, I'd be like, whoa, how did they know that? Well, I literally just told them that was true. So it's just spitting back to you what you told them, right? So that's one thing. Also, this test can be easily gamed because the questions are so obvious in terms of what they're getting at, right? So if you're in forensic psychology and you're trying to figure out someone and you're trying to assess someone and that individual might be hostile to you as an assessor, this test would do you no good. And you heard me talk about that with Dr. Curry and Dr. Hughes, in which Dr. Hughes, most of her tests that she was giving to Amber Heard were along these lines, where like symptom checklists, where it's like obvious what the test is getting at and very easy to lie and to game, and thus those tests should be considered as such, right? Whereas a test like the MMPI, you can't really predict what the question is trying to get at. It's weird, right? There are questions on the test that are associated with personality, and there's no easy. Some of the questions are kind of obvious, but a lot of them aren't. So it's very difficult to game in that way. The other thing is that with the MMPI, if you showed the different scales, and there are 10 main scales, but there are dozens of other scales as well, which is the interesting part of the MMPI. It doesn't just give you one set of scales. It gives you a lot of scales and subscales and all that kind of thing. And if you ask people to predict how they're going to, test, most people wouldn't know. I mean, they might be, well, maybe a little bit this, but they wouldn't know how far they were, because that's another thing is Enneagram doesn't necessarily give you a degree or of the personality trait. MMPI will. So that's why we don't tend to use Enneagram. And as I said before, since I qualify for 7 of the 9 types, then are they really types? It's like, imagine if we tested people on Big 5, so that's another personality categorization that we will use and supported by science, which one of the spectra is introversion, extroversion, right? Which is also common to Myers-Briggs, which is the one thing that probably is scientifically based on that test. But imagine if most people said, oh, I'm both an extrovert and an introvert. Not on a scale, they're literally both, okay? So for me, for example, I'm definitely the achiever. I'm definitely oriented that way. I'm definitely cerebral, detached, definitely that. Definitely optimistic, adventure, and patient, definitely that. Definitely leader / bossy. Definitely perfectionistic. Definitely generous / people-pleasing. Definitely creative, sensitive, maybe a little sensitive to relationships. That's 7 out of the 9 categories. So it's not helpful, right? It could be helpful, I suppose, but it's not helpful in terms of a typology. It doesn't pan out that when we have types like extroversion, introversion, we see one that there's a spectrum that everyone will tend to land on that spectrum, and they will consistently land on that spectrum, and it will predict behavior. That's another thing, is the Enneagram doesn't really predict how that individual will react or behave in the future, whereas tests that we use tend to have a greater chance of being able to predict how they will behave in the future. That sort of, anyway. The other thing that I always think about is the Enneagram test is based on some mystic author that existed 1600, 1700 years ago in Egypt. Some random author in Alexandria, Egypt, 1700 years, 1,700 years ago, was just, thinking stuff up in their mind. And they came up with Enneagram, and then it was sort of rediscovered 100 years ago and then packaged and said, look at this thing. It's not likely to be based, MMPI is based on rigorous science, thousands of studies, hundreds of thousands of participants that have been actually looked at and their behavior and their diagnoses and over time and, scrutinized and reevaluated and revised. And so Enneagram, whenever anyone looks at it, they're like, well, this isn't helpful. It's not useful. It doesn't stand up to the rigor of science. And that's important. When I was getting back to cultural relativism and, thinking scientifically, thinking critically, this is all part of it. Now, I will say that the Enneagram is one of the more helpful of the pseudoscientific tests out there because, like with the Myers-Briggs, I find personally that some of the dimensions, I'm like, I don't even understand what, like judgment versus, I don't even understand what I'll hear people describe it to you and I'm like, well, that doesn't resonate with me. This does, like the descriptions of the 7 types or the 7 categories, 7 traits, shall we say, I think are coherent. I understand what they're getting at, right? Like when they talk about the perfectionist and they describe that number 1 type, I get that. It stands to reason, mostly because modern contemporary authors have adapted the 1,700-year-old ideas to modern thinking, and which is based on science. And I'm pretty sure the Enneagram authors either read directly or at least were somewhat aware of psychology and how we think about things. But the other thing I'll say about Enneagram, and there's a lot of additional claims that Enneagram will make that are completely not supported by the evidence. Things about like compatibility of 2 types or of different configurations, because they have this whole diagram where if you're this one, then this is your opposite, and then this one kind of, and none of that is supported by evidence. I think the best thing you could use the Enneagram for is to don't even take the test. Well, if you take the test, fine. But I think best just read the 9 types and think, oh, that's kind of me, or think, okay, those 5 are kind of me. Those 2 are maybe less so, and the other ones aren't really me. And then read the various different authors talk about it, because they probably are good at saying, here's your strength, but here's your downside, and then kind of apply it to yourself and see if it makes any sense. Like I could see that being helpful, but all the other claims, like if you're a 9, and you marry a 2, then you're doomed. That kind of thing. It's just like there's no evidence to back that up. It's just not the case, and it's upsetting that people would follow those kinds of I'm just going to say it, crap on the internet and just made up stuff. When me and my field, us in my field, we have data that could help you. There is a lot of data regarding compatibility of personality, attachment styles. There's no definitive thing you can say. It's tendencies, and predicting people's compatibility is really, really hard. But there is some things you can look for, some things you can say. So anyway, and if you want more information on that, listen to my deep dive on scientific matchmaking, is what it's called, on YouTube. A couple years ago when I was watching Married at First Sight, the reality TV show. If you don't know about it, these 3 experts, they have like a minister, a social psychologist here at University of Washington, and a family therapist, and they interview all these applicants, and then they match people. These 3 people say that person and that, and they also supposedly give a lot of personality tests. I don't know how rigorous that is. And they match 2 people, and then they get married without ever meeting each. So they see each other for the first time as they're walking down the aisle. They get married, and then the reality TV show follows them to see if they stay together over the next few months. Most people don't, by the way. Big surprise there. So in that episode, as I was watching, these experts were making all these claims about science, and there was one scientist from the University of Washington, my alma mater. I'm pointing because it's down this way. University of Washington is that way, and she's an actual scientist. She studies it. She knows. She's not just some random person making claims. She understands the scientific method. And then there's a doctoral level marriage and family therapist who is also making claims of scientifically based matchmaking. And so I decided to do a deep dive on matchmaking. It's like, what do we know about that? Can we use science to match people up and predict a greater likelihood of them being, one, compatible and attracted? Because I broke it down to two things. Would they be attracted to each other, and would they stay together? Because those are two different questions, right? Because if you could be not attracted to someone in the beginning, but then maybe over time fall in love. You could also be very attracted to someone and not stay together over time, right? So those are the two main questions. Would you be attracted to someone? And mainly, if you're not attracted, you're not going to go to step two. And two, will you stay together over time and not fight and enjoy each other's company and that kind of thing? And what I found, long story short, is we don't have that ability. People are too complicated, and attraction is too weird. And there are some things you can say, like if people are more securely attached, meaning that they were raised with more attunement growing up, less traumatized, then they have a greater likelihood of lasting. But that has nothing to do with whether they would be attracted to each other or not. So, yeah, that's what I'll say about that. But if you're looking for an easy model, because MMPI, you can't administer that to yourself. You can't even get your hands on it. It's illegal to actually have the test because it's a copyrighted document and they protect it pretty closely. But there is something that is available to everyone, and it's called schema therapy. And I've done a lot of deep dives on that as well. You can listen to that. But with schema therapy, the tests are pretty easy to take, and there's a lot of them online. This is developed by Jung. I can't remember his first name. Not Carl Jung, but Jung, as in young and old. That's his last name. And there are contemporary writers and researchers, and there are 18 different schemas that they developed. And although I don't think those are comprehensive, it gets at most of the things. In fact, a lot of the things on the Enneagram are represented as schemas in schema therapy. But what schema therapy doesn't claim is that if you have this schema, then you match with this other schema. Or if you have this schema, then you don't have other schemas. With schema therapy, you could have all of the schemas or none of the schemas. I mean, it'd be unlikely to have all the schemas, but it's more based on science. It's a more rational model of, we have this obsession with typing people in our society. Like, oh, you're a Scorpio. Like we want people to be in categories. Oh, you're a man, you're a woman, you're a person from, the country, or you're a city person. We have this obsession with typing people. We want to know, we want to categorize. And the fact is personality is way more complicated than that. And we've tried, and so many researchers and authors have tried to develop personality typologies, and almost none of them have worked out. Big Five has worked out, which is ocean, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Those 5 dimensions do tend to be scientifically sound. So there's that. Schema therapy, in terms of the claims they make, is pretty solid. Anyway, so, oh boy. I just feel like I've just been lecturing everyone today, and I don't know how nice I am today. George and Anfisa, number 20. Okay. Miss Houston left a nice comment. Thank you, Miss Houston. Alicia, one of the 3 Alicias, Alicia McIntyre, says, I think people excuse Anfisa now because the public made fun of her a lot when this first came out, and that was cruel. But she is definitely also abusive. Interesting. I didn't know that. So when she first, when this George and Anfisa story came out, it was, 2 or 3 years ago, she was attacked a lot in the beginning? Huh. I guess that would make sense, that if she was overly attacked, then there might be a group of people who try to defend her, which is, I guess, a good thing. Noelle says, thank you, Dr. Honda. For years, I have been bewildered and heartbroken at the legions of Anfisa fans that cheer her on and support her, giving George what he deserves. I don't know if these women have been conditioned to only see certain types of physical violence or abuse, or if our culture of reality TV has normalized physical abuse, or if the commenters secretly want to engage physically with their partners. It reminds me of women who shoot their spouses when they are cheated on, and how often I've seen people cheering for them. Yeah, so I get it, but it's not a good thing, obviously. It makes sense when we zoom out that for a lot of women, they have experienced a lot of oppression, a lot of sexism, a lot of misogyny, a lot of people, men overpowering them, mistreating them throughout their life. And then when they decide to, or they see a woman striking back in any way, then it feels fair, right? Because that one man, in essence, to them, is representing all the men, all the oppressors. And I get that. And there are times when I think that that's just what's going to happen when we have a movement, when we have injustice and the oppressed are striking back. Sometimes some people will get an exaggerated reaction when they probably shouldn't, if you just think of the individual interaction. But when you think of the overall movement as a whole, it's probably a good thing that this overall power take back is happening. So I get that, but it doesn't make it okay, of course. And to say that George deserves to be hit by Anfisa is just patently absurd. I mean, unless people know other data to justify it from behind the scenes that George is, I don't know, hitting her. But even then, I just can't imagine what she's doing. Anyway, what we're seeing on the TV gives zero justification for hitting him. And, I can understand if people come from an abusive place, they've been abused by men, and they're just like, they have no empathy for George, and they have urges to strike back, maybe even murder men because of the way they've been treated. Okay, but to look at Anfisa and to say that that's okay is not okay. And for people who have been oppressed and they overcompensate by saying it's okay to hit George, you're basically condoning abuse of everyone, because you're saying that when you're angry or pissed off at someone, or that it's generally okay to hit, right? And that's obviously perhaps the attitude that caused people to hit you in the first place. And so, and that's another part of it, actually, now that I think about it, is that when we're abused, we tend to have a choice. And one of the things we can do to defend ourselves is to identify with the abuser, because we feel powerless and our abuser is powerful. And so we want to absorb their qualities. And one of their qualities is that they will hit people. And so we will, on the inside, kind of want to abuse other people because that's our path to power. And it's the only one we've been modeled. So prior to full recovery from those traumas, you might have a phase where you actually condone or even harm other people in a very unfair way because you're actually trying to get your power back by taking a shortcut of emulating your abuser, So you could imagine people commenting, I don't want to diagnose them, I don't know what's going on with people, but I mean, I said that funny, but I don't know these people, I'm sure they have reasons, but it's possible that some of them have been abused, and so they've unconsciously identified with the abuser, and then Anfisa kind of confuses them because they identify with Anfisa because maybe they have qualities that are similar to Anfisa. And then Anfisa hits, and they're just like, yeah, I mean, that's how you take power, and that's what you do. And that's as far as they go with their perspective. They don't actually think, well, wait, from George's side, is that justified that he's being hit? So they're just kind of stuck in that position, which might be a good part of their recovery. I don't know. Because I'm thinking that for George, I don't know what he's up to now. I hope he's okay. Both of them are okay. DJ says, this happened to me, actually. So again, George and Anfisa. This happened to me. I used to get hit by my partner for stupid reasons, especially if we were having an argument. I just thought it was normal. It was embarrassing and soul draining. I would constantly lie about small things, like George, because I didn't want to get in trouble. Yeah, I was lying, which is wrong, but it was a survival tactic. I remember once I was fixing the pool pump, and she got so frustrated at me for some reason that she hit me in the head from behind. I hit my head on the concrete, and it knocked me out for a few minutes. It started off like what happened in this video with Anfisa and George, and over the years, it got worse and worse. Abuse happens to men as well, and anyone that sticks up for this kind of behavior needs to check themselves. It's disgusting. I'm out of that relationship now. I had massive traumas from it, but I recovered and have a wonderful new partner and baby now. Well, DJ, I'm sorry you went through that. It's just incredibly awful. I mean, just that one incident is like, whoa. So you're fixing the pool pump, and she got frustrated with you for some reason and hit you in the back of the head from behind. You hit your head on the concrete. It knocked you out for a few minutes. I mean, wow. Awful. Criminal. Traumatic. I'm sorry you went through that. I hope people heard you and didn't, as a man, I hope you weren't discounted by people. But on this channel, you will not be discounted by me or by the commenters. We welcome you. And I'm glad that you've recovered and that you have a wonderful new partner and baby. That's great. And you do also say another point here is that it started like with what Anfisa did, and it got worse and worse, which is almost always the case. And the look on Anfisa's face when she hits him and the non-apology afterwards is extremely concerning. Patron Catherine from Kansas City actually emailed in and said, "Hi, Dr. Kirk, short question for you. When you are podcasting by yourself, what do you look at? Your notes, the wall? I just finished your deep dive on narcissistic personality disorder and couldn't stop wondering." Yeah, I think I would be curious too, because when I listen to podcasts, sometimes I'm wondering too. Well, generally speaking, I'm sitting right here, and I'm looking at this screen, which has my notes on it, and I'm talking into this microphone. So if you just want to, now I'm slouching or I'm very comfortable and I turn off the lights. I mean, it's not in the dark, but I have fairly subdued lighting. Like right now I have all my camera lights that are blasting on me right now. And when I first had these, because early 2 years ago when I first started doing more videos, we discovered that we needed lights. And when I first started getting, I was just like, how do people deal with these lights? But I've gotten used to them over time. But with audio podcasts, I turn all of it. When it's me and a guest, I also have very subdued. I just like it cozy in my office, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, that's what I'm doing. Regarding Bilal, patron Rachel from LA said, "Some within Islam consider the temporary marriage to be a spiritual loophole for dating in a less traditional Islamic way. These marriages are used to date and have sex without breaking the rules." Interesting. So I think what they're saying, Rachel, is that for maybe Bilal and Shida, their marriage that they had prior to, because they were spiritually married in Trinidad, right? And maybe that's like you'll get married in a spiritual way so that you can date the way you would want to, where you have sex and hang out, but you might not stay temporarily married. Is that what you're saying? Interesting. Comments 81 star 123 says, I think Dr. Honda may feel it sounds defensive or repetitive to always tag on the disclaimer of just because you can have understanding and compassion for a person who behaves abusively doesn't mean you should stick around to be their punching bag. There are a variety of viewers in his audience. There will be subscribers who have not grown up with Dr. Honda. Yeah, okay, well, that's good to know, Star. Basically what Star is saying, because I will occasionally get questions from people saying, and I said this last week, that, so you're saying that abusive people have reasons, they were traumatized, this kind of thing. And they will say to me, but I don't want to be around that abusive person anymore. And I feel like I shouldn't be abused anymore. And I'm like, well, yeah, you're being abused. You deserve to not be abused. And if you don't want to be with that person, you probably shouldn't. And as I always say, if I have an abusive person in my life, I'll do what I can. But if it doesn't work, I'm out. I'm not their therapist, you know, and they're not asking me for help. And unless they are on a track of getting better, then, you know, I have one life to live. So I'm not going to waste it being abused by someone. And, you know, that's happened in my life. So, so to me, it's obvious, but I understand that for a lot of people, they come to the table with assumptions that they've been fed by society, that it's important that I say that. And so try to remind me if I ever talk about things and you're like, oh no, I see some comments of news people who haven't grown up with me. And, you know, let me know, because I'm trying to remind myself, but I probably won't remember, because it just seems so obvious to me that just because I have a conceptualization of abusive person, why would that mean you have to be abused by that? It's sort of like we could have a conceptualization of someone who murdered someone, right? Well, here's the psychological profile, here's the traumas they went through, here's their issues, they were on some medication, da da da. Well, actually, I suppose if I did say that, a lot of people would confuse that with like, well, they're not responsible and thus they shouldn't have to go to prison or something. So yeah, I guess it's just, I don't know. I guess I live in this world so much that there are some assumptions that I think are obvious, but are, you know, they're clearly not. And that's okay. I just need to remind myself. Will Smith apology video that I posted last week. Jade says, thank you, Dr. Honda. My partner and I use your 10-step approach when we can't seem to get out of a rut in our disagreements. We have also used it as a jumping off point in couples therapy. Well, Jade, 2 thumbs up for that. Also, I'm revising my 10-step approach because I'm right now working on my deep dive more, and I'm refining it. It's basically the same, but it's changing a little bit. MK says, I think his speech, Will Smith, because I was talking about how his speech is a little stilted. I think his speech is stilted when reading the questions because he's stressed in general. There's also a lot of tension in his voice. Yeah, that's a good point. I could see that being part of it. Emily and Kobe, number 9. Mr. Rust says, the new haircut is fire, not on fire. You add one word in there, and it's the new haircut is about my haircut, I think. The new haircut is on fire. No, the new haircut is fire. Yeah, you like it? I mean, so before the pandemic, I wasn't on YouTube video very often, so I didn't really care about my hair, and I would basically just want it to be functional. And when the pandemic happened, and so prior to the pandemic, I basically just had this general haircut situation. Pandemic happened, no haircuts for a year, and so I cut my own hair, and Stacy, my wife, would cut the back because I would really. It's funny to think. Sometimes I'll see, because people will suggest videos for TikToks, you know, and they'll watch like a video from 2 years ago, and so I'll be editing it for the TikTok or the short or the Instagram reel, and I'm looking at my hair and I'm just like, my hair is so wild back then, because it slowly grew out, obviously, and I didn't really notice how kind of different it was. But anyway, you don't see it, but if I ever had turned my head, you would just see this massive amount of hair, because my wife, it's kind of a pain in the butt because she doesn't cut hair, and she would get kind of nervous about it. She'd be like, I don't know if I'm doing it okay. And I'm just like, it doesn't matter. In the pandemic, no one sees me, and on camera, it's only the front of my face. So, you could shave it all off and no one will see it. But sometimes there'd be a lot of hair back there, and sometimes there'd be a messed up hair. I think one time my wife, she's cutting my hair. I got a hefty bag and put my head through it, and I'm out in the back porch as she's cutting, and all of a sudden she just starts giggling. She's just like, oh, and I'm like, what? And she's like, nothing. I guess I don't know, but I don't care. I'm married. She's not going to leave me because of that. So anyway, my hair got more and more kind of odd. And then once I came out of the pandemic, started cutting it, I didn't know exactly what to do with my hair. Anyway, so then more recently, I decided to comb my hair on the other side. This is the side I comb my hair on. I would part my hair on until for the first 40 years of my life. I would always, there was a time in the mid 80s where I parted it right down the middle, like Ralph Macchio and Scott Baio. I remember their hair was like cool and right down. There was a brief moment mid 80s when dudes had it just like right down the middle and kind of poofy with mousse. But anyway, but yeah, so I always parted on this side. And then about 10 years ago when I was about 40, for some reason I just decided I'm going to part on the other side. And so I'm sure this is way more information than you care to see, but I don't know. Thanks for the compliment about my hair. What I was going to say is, prior to making videos, it didn't really matter what my hair looked like, and I didn't really care. And then I started making these videos, and people would start being like, commenting on my hair and stuff, and I'm like, oh, what does my hair look like? And I think, is it distracting? Is it a bad thing? So I'm suddenly like, in the morning after taking a shower, I'm just like, okay, how do I make my hair non-offensive to people? Not offensive, but, presentable to the world. Anyway, Ms. Violets says, it feels like Emily, so Emily and Kobe number 9, it feels like Emily is trying to force Kobe into an underfunctioning role so she won't be the underfunctioner anymore in her family. I have a feeling she belittles him the way someone once belittled her. I think she talks down to him to make herself feel better. Ms. Violets, love that. That makes a lot of sense. I could absolutely see that, because it is interesting, right? Because Emily in her family is definitely an underfunctioner in a certain way. Well, she's a bossy underfunctioner, right? Seemingly. And with Kobe, it's like she wants to be a bossy overfunctioner, which is interesting. But yeah, I like it. She's trying to force him to be the underfunctioner. One, because she doesn't want to be the underfunctioner anymore. And two, because that's maybe how she was treated. Yeah. Sarah says, quoting me, I don't give a crap where the goddamn fork goes. That comment made my day. I feel the same. My English grandmother, on the other hand, not so much. I never quite absorbed her etiquette lessons, but I think I turned out all right. Yeah, another cultural relative thing. Ultimatum number 24. Natalia says, did a super thanks, actually. Thanks for that. Is there something one can do when their partner's shut down? It's so difficult to experience this and watch it. Yeah, so when your partner shuts down, it is very difficult. And there's a very common way to find a solution to that. I don't know about your partner, Natalia, and I don't know about everyone, obviously, but a real common road to better communication is to understand why the person is shutting down, and to have the shutting downer understand why that person is shutting down as well. But this could take a long time, right? Obviously, a lot of therapy might be involved. But people shut down often because they're overwhelmed, they're afraid of something, they have trauma that's being triggered. They might be deciding to shut down, or they might be physiologically shutting down. So it's important not to think of people who shut down as volitionally doing that, because if you see it that way, then it seems like they're purposely withdrawing from you, which as a passive aggression against you, which is possible, but it's more likely that the person they don't know what to do. And so if you can address that, then you can eliminate the possibility of them shutting down. Often it involves the person talking to the person who's shutting down. They're often being overbearing or intense in some way or triggering in some way. And so if you can figure that out, it's often your tone. Another thing to think about is how fast you ramp up. Like for me, for example, I can go from 0 to 10 and be okay with it. Someone could come at me, like my wife could come at me without any warning and say, I got a bone to pick with you. You need to stop doing this and you need to apologize. Given my profession or personality or something, I'll have a little second of like, wait, what's happening? But I can immediately, because I feel very comfortable in that space. If someone were to confront me, I'm very comfortable in that space. I'm very experienced, mostly because of working with clients and students and supervisees and just in that world, it's normal for that to suddenly happen. So I trust that everything will work out. That's a big part of it is, oh crap, I'm being confronted, but I've been through it so many times and habituated to it that I'm like, well, this will work out, or we'll see our way through this kind of thing. Not everyone has that assumption when you come at them. And so you might have to have a slow ramp up where you might say something like, hey, so can we talk about something? And do you have 5 minutes? And I don't want to alarm you. This is on the scale of things. It's kind of a 2 out of 10. It's just barely a thing. So don't worry about it. And if you don't want to say anything, you don't have to. But I just have a couple things I want to say, get off my chest. It would really make me feel better. It's this real slow ramp up. Whereas for some people, like myself, I'm not used to that. And I don't feel like that's natural, but I feel like a lot of people need that. Another kind of slower ramp up technique is to text someone or email. So people who shut down, if you text them or email them, they're less likely to shut down because they can take their time in reacting and then responding. For a lot of people who shut down, their brains become overwhelmed physically to the point where they can't think and can't say anything, and then they're freaking out, and then they'll blame you, even though you're just bringing something up that is justified. But they'll think of you as the problem when you're not the problem. You're just a different kind of communicator. And so they will withdraw and attack you internally or even externally. It's just like, well, here you go again. And you're just like, what? Like, I thought, isn't it okay to say? So obviously couple therapy is the answer, but those are some tips. Ultimatum number 26. Are we almost done with the ultimatum? Just a little peek behind the curtain. So have I talked about this? So, the ultimatum aired months ago, right? And I watched the whole thing. And at the time, there was a fair amount going on with 90 Day Fiancé because it was the previous season, right? And, I'd made a lot of ultimatum reaction videos, and we didn't get them out during that time because we were always like, well, we got to prioritize this and then this. And then the trial happened. And that just, took up so many different slots that we have because we tend to post two. Oh, and just a caveat before I forget. This summer, I'm trying to focus more on deep dives for the audio podcast. And I'm working on the apology deep dive right now because it takes me weeks, and it's 16-hour days. When I do deep dives, I work from the minute I wake up. Maybe I'll go for a walk and have breakfast, and then I just basically am reading research and thinking and writing and all day long. And I need those huge blocks of time, and so I don't have time to make necessarily 2 videos a day on YouTube. And so you might have noticed that we're not posting necessarily 2 videos a day. I think what we're thinking is on the weekends we'll post fewer. If not, we'll post no videos on the weekend, that kind of thing, or maybe 1 or something. And I hope that's okay with people. It's also giving me a little bit of breathing room to socialize a little bit more, especially after the trial. I mean, my life was 24/7, or 16 hours a day, trial stuff all the time. That's all I was doing for 7 days a week for 6 weeks straight, kind of a thing. Anyway, so there's that. But with ultimatum, so the trial came out, and then that took up all those slots. So, and then there were other kinds of videos, and then so now we're just getting to we're finally posting the ultimatum. So when you comment on the ultimatum videos, I'm like, what was I talking about? I mean, it was so long ago to me, But yeah, so Kate says, thank you so very much for explaining the steps of assertiveness. I am a lot like Ray and grew up in a household very similar to how you explained. I started going to therapy to learn how to express my emotions and found now I am overly reactive at times and quite sensitive to opposition. Due to that, I have been confused and down on myself. You brought me some relief, and I hope that I am on the right track. Thank you. Well, great, Katie. I'm glad that you're on the right track. And yeah, that is why I have that 3-step model, because often we're talking about assertiveness in couples usually, and when we see people progressing through to more mature assertiveness, they have that middle step where they're more oppositional and reactive, and it's alarming to both partners. The partner of the assertive growth person is like, why am I getting opposed? I want you to go back to the way you were. And then the assertive person is shaming themselves, is like, God, I'm just so angry all the time. I'm so oppositional all the time. What's going on? And the temptation is to go back to being a doormat. But what I tell people is, no, everyone needs to go through a phase where they can oppose freely and spontaneously so that they can feel safe to do so. Think of it like when you start off as a doormat and we're trying to get to a truly assertive place where you're able to assert yourself while also considering the other person's feelings. In order to do that, you got to be differentiated, right? You have to be calm, relative, and you have to be able to think straight, right? Well, when you're a doormat, you're not thinking straight because you're afraid, and so you're being walked on while you're secretly angry. The second phase, as we get to true assertiveness, is I'm going to establish once and for all that I am safe to oppose, and I can say what's on my mind, and that's okay. But you're still afraid, but you're not as afraid, but you're still very afraid. And so there's this new territory. So you're just like, I'm going to spontaneously just be like, no, I don't want to do that. No, you're wrong. And I don't want that. And, and there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of lack of differentiation in this phase. But what's happening is the individual is experiencing through corrective experiences that it's okay to be spontaneous and angry and to speak one's mind. Once they can feel safe doing that, they can actually relax a little bit. And then the third phase is to integrate everything and actually consider the other person's point of view while also feeling free to oppose. I'm free to oppose. I'm okay to oppose, but I don't have to oppose, and I'm calm. I'm okay, And so it's important for the couple to understand that so that they don't go back to the way things were. Jennifer says, around the 11-minute point, when you speak about speaking a way of having a tone, that would be a good TikTok. Oh, thanks. I'll try to pull that section down. And by the way, if you ever do have a suggestion for a TikTok or a short or a reel, it's greatly appreciated, because I figured out a long time ago that if I was going to do TikTok and reels or shorts, I did not have time to actually comb through my videos. There's so much other tasks. Every once in a while I'll be editing a video, I'll be like, oh, that'll be a good TikTok, but it doesn't happen very often. So yeah, if you can email me, actually is the best way. Go to the website, email me, especially if you include a link of the video itself, and then I can just quickly figure out what's going on. But if you comment, there's a chance we'll see it, but there's also a chance we won't, because I can't imagine people upvoting that, because I tend to only read the top comments because I don't have time to read every comment. Sorry about that. I wish I did. It actually does give me anxiety that I can't. While I'm on that topic, I've always had a policy of reading everyone's email on the air. Not every email, but like any relevant email to the podcast. And I have such a backlog of emails that I don't know if it's possible, but I had an idea that I would spend like a couple days reading and responding to every single email, but the episode, because there's only so many slots that we have episodes for, so I'd make like a couple episodes that would be 5 hours long or something. And because, I don't know, I just have always had this policy. It's kind of dumb though. Along those lines, if you want an email to be read on the air, or at least given a little bit more breathing room, and more of an elaborate response, I have to prioritize something, and we have decided a while ago we would prioritize patrons and also upper tier annual patrons, these kinds of people. I don't know if that's the right way to do it or if it's fair or whatever, but it's one way to do it, one way to incentivize people becoming a patron. But yeah. But I do try to literally get to every single email. And that's my goal. And according to my Enneagram, I'm an achiever, so I'm going to do it. I'm optimistic, so I have optimism, but I'm also impatient, so I want to get it now. I'm a perfectionist. It's definitely involved in that. I'm a people pleaser. It's involved in that. So my Enneagram says, I gotta, so I will. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.